The kitchen door swung shut behind her, cutting off the blast of heat and the shouted orders. For a second, Elena just stood in the quiet corridor of the restaurant, her back against the cool wall. She let her eyes close. The noise from the dining room was a low, polite hum, but all she could hear was the angry throb at her feet. They were always sore by this point in the shift, a dull, familiar ache that started in her heels and crept up her calves. She pushed off the wall and smoothed down her apron. The black fabric was worn thin at the edges, and a small stain from a spilled balsamic reduction earlier in the week refused to come out completely. She checked her watch. 2 more hours. Just 2 more hours of balancing trays, of smiling through rude comments, of remembering who got the steak medium rare and who wanted the dressing on the side. Then she could go home. Home was a small apartment across town, a place that felt more like a storage unit for worry than a sanctuary. The bills were stacked neatly on her tiny kitchen table, a tower of white envelopes that seemed to grow every week. Most of them were final notices, stamped in red, for her mother's medical treatments. The treatments were over now. Her mother was gone. But the bills remained, a ghost of the long, slow illness that had taken everything her mother's life, Elena's savings, and the future she had once dreamed of. Elena took a deep breath, fixed a polite, neutral expression on her face, and pushed back through the doors into the dining room of the Gilded Oak. The Gilded Oak was the kind of place that whispered money. It didn't shout. The floors were dark, polished wood that gleamed under soft light. The walls were lined with bottles of wine that cost more than a month's rent. In the center of the room stood a baby grand piano, its lid always closed, its surface dusted every day, but never used. It was a prop, a piece of furniture meant to suggest culture. To Elena, it was just another thing to walk around. Her section was near the back, and her newest table was already a problem. She could tell from across the room. 4 men in expensive, casual suits. The one in the corner seat, a man with sharp eyes and salt and pepper hair, was holding court. His laugh was a little too loud, his gestures a little too broad. She'd seen his type before. He was showing off for his friends, making sure everyone in the vicinity knew he was the most important person at the table, maybe in the whole room. She approached, her notepad ready. "Good evening, gentlemen. Can I start you with something to drink?" The man in the corner, she'd later learn his name was Lucas Thorne, looked at her as if she were a part of the menu. He didn't smile. "We'll need the wine list. The real one. Not the one you give to tourists." "Of course," Elena said, her voice even. She fetched the heavy leather-bound book and handed it to him. His fingers, she noticed, were clean, the nails perfectly trimmed. No calluses. He spent a long time discussing the wines, using words like bouquet and terroir, while his friends nodded along. He finally chose a bottle so expensive, Elena had to get the manager to approve the key to the special cellar. She brought it back, went through the ritual of presenting the cork, pouring a taste. He swirled it, sniffed it, sipped it, and made a show of considering it before giving a curt nod. As she filled the glasses, he said, to no one in particular, "It'll do." For a place like this. Elena kept her smile in place. For a place like this, the Gilded Oak was one of the finest restaurants in the city. But to him, it was just a backdrop. She was part of the scenery, too. A moving part in the machine that served him. The orders were complicated. One wanted his filet mignon butterflied. Another needed the gluten-free option explained in detail. Another asked for an extra side of asparagus, but only if it was pencil thin. Lucas ordered the dry-aged ribeye, rare, with a specific sauce on the side in its own vessel. He never said "please Dot" as she worked her other tables. She could feel the energy coming from his booth. It was a cloud of smugness and noise. Their laughter was too frequent, too aggressive. They were talking about deals and acquisitions. Words like leverage and hostile takeover floated over. Lucas was telling a story about outsmarting a competitor, and his voice carried. The guy just didn't see it coming, Lucas said, chuckling. He was so busy looking at the numbers on the paper, he forgot to look at the man across the table. Rookie mistake. Elena delivered their appetizers. She refilled their water. She brought fresh bread. Each time she approached, the conversation dipped for a second, and she felt their eyes on her, assessing her efficiency, then dismissing her as they went back to their world of millions. Her feet hurt worse now. A sharp pain had joined the dull ache. She thought about her apartment, about the quiet she would find there. It wasn't a happy quiet. It was the quiet of being alone, of being tired, of staring at those bills and feeling the walls close in. But it was hers. In that quiet, no one laughed too loud or looked at her like she was furniture. She cleared their appetizer plates. Lucas's steak arrived. She placed the sizzling plate before him with care. He cut into it immediately, not waiting for the others. A bead of blood-red juice pooled on the white china. He took a bite and chewed slowly. Overdone, he declared, though the center was a perfect deep red. Take it back. Elena didn't argue. She'd seen this before, too. A power play. A way to prove to his friends that nothing was below his standards. I'm sorry to hear that, sir. I'll have the kitchen prepare another. She took the plate, still hot, back to the kitchen. The head chef, a man with a sweaty red face and tired eyes, looked at the steak and cursed under his breath. It's perfect. He's just a jackass. I know, Elena said softly. Can we just do another quickly? While she waited, she leaned against the stainless steel counter. She looked at her hands. They were good hands, strong. They could carry 3 heavy plates at once. They could polish wine glasses to a sparkle. Once, a long time ago, they had done something else. Something that felt like a dream from someone else's life. She flexed her fingers, feeling the joints, remembering a different kind of ache, one from hours of practice, from stretching to reach an octave, from the repetitive motion of scales. She shook her head, pushing the memory away. That was gone. That was the past. This was her life now. Sore feet, rude customers, and a tower of white envelopes. She delivered the new steak. Lucas accepted it without a word, without a thank you. The meal dragged on. They ordered a second bottle of wine and port with their dessert. The bill was going to be astronomical. Elena calculated her potential tip in her head. 20% of that could cover one of the smaller bills on her table. It was a lifeline. She just had to get through the next 30 minutes. Finally, they were finished. The plates were cleared, except for their coffee cups. Lucas was leaning back, his arms stretched across the back of the booth, looking around the room with a satisfied, possessive air. His eyes drifted, and they landed on the piano in the center of the room. Elena approached with the leather bill folder. She placed it respectfully in the center of the table. Whenever you're ready, gentlemen. Thank you for dining with us tonight. She was about to turn away, to give them their privacy, when Lucas's voice stopped her. It was louder now, sharp and clear, meant to be heard. You there? Elena turned back. Yes, sir? Lucas didn't reach for the bill. Instead, he pointed. His finger was aimed directly at the silent, glossy piano. A slow, mean smile spread across his face. He looked at his friends, then back at her. Tell you what, he said, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet section of the restaurant. I'm feeling generous. I'll add $1,000 tip to this bill right now. $1,000. Cash. He let the number hang in the air. One of his friends raised an eyebrow. A woman at the next table glanced over. The manager, standing by the host's stand, looked up nervously. Lucas leaned forward, his eyes locked on Elena. "All you have to do is go over there and play something for us. Anything. A little song. Show us what you can do." The silence that followed was thick and heavy. The hum of the restaurant had died down. Everyone nearby was listening. Elena could feel her face grow hot. Her heart, which had been beating slowly with fatigue, began to hammer against her ribs. The $1,000 danced in her mind, a glowing, impossible number. It could wipe out half the stack of envelopes. It could buy her months of peace. But the dare in his eyes was clear. He wasn't offering her a chance. He was setting her up for a fall. He was certain she couldn't do it. He was buying a joke, and she was the punchline. The money wasn't a reward. It was the price of her public humiliation. He wanted to see the waitress stumble, to fumble at the keys, to provide one last bit of entertainment for his table. She looked from his smug face to the piano. The closed lid seemed to mock her. It had been years. So many years. Her fingers, which now carried trays and scrubbed tables, felt clumsy and foreign at the thought. For a second, the weight of everything, the soreness, the grief, the fear from the bills, the sheer exhaustion of this man's presence pressed down on her. She just wanted to leave, to say no, to walk away. She met his gaze. Her voice, when she found it, was quiet but steady in the hushed room. "Keep your money," she said. And for a moment, she thought that was it. She thought she had ended it. But Lucas Thorne wasn't a man who accepted no. His smile didn't fade. It widened. He hadn't gotten his spectacle. He raised his voice another notch, ensuring no one in the room could miss his next words. "Scared?" He asked, the word echoing. "Come on, make your night worthwhile. What's the matter? Don't tell me you don't know how." His friends were grinning now, caught up in the game. The woman at the next table looked down at her lap, embarrassed for Elena. The manager took a small step forward, but then hesitated, caught between a valued customer and an employee. The humiliation was no longer just an offer. It was a cage, built around her in the middle of the elegant dining room. Every eye was on her. The choice was gone. Walking away now would be a different kind of defeat. It would be an admission of his power over her. Elena stood perfectly still. The low hum of the restaurant was gone, replaced by a ringing in her ears. She looked at Lucas, at his waiting, triumphant face. Then, without a word, she turned. But she didn't turn towards the kitchen or the exit. She turned, and in the dead silence, she began to walk, step by step, across the polished wooden floor, directly toward the shining, silent piano. The sound of her own shoes on the floor was the only thing Elena could hear. It was a soft, steady click against the polished wood, but in the quiet of the room, it felt as loud as a hammer. Every step took her further from the world of trays and tips and into a spotlight she never wanted. She could feel all the eyes on her back. She knew what they were seeing. A waitress in a worn apron, her shoulders set in a straight line, walking toward a beautiful instrument she had no business touching. She didn't look left or right. She kept her gaze fixed on the piano's closed lid, that deep, dark wood that seemed to swallow the light around it. The walk felt like it took an hour. In her mind, she was 1,000,000 miles away. She was 10 years old again, sitting on a hard bench in a cold practice room, her small hands struggling to span the keys. She could smell the old paper of her music books. She could hear her teacher's patient voice saying, again, from the top, "Feel it this time." That life felt like a story someone else had told her. After her mother got sick, everything changed. The long hours of practice were replaced by long hours at the hospital. The scholarship letters were put in a drawer, buried under insurance forms. The future, which had once been as clear and bright as sheet music, just faded away. The piano became a memory, a ghost, something that belonged to a different Atlanta Dot, and now here she was, walking toward one in a room full of strangers. Her heart was beating so hard, she thought it might crack a rib. Her hands, which had felt so steady carrying 3 dinner plates, were now trembling at her sides. She curled them into fists, feeling her short, practical nails dig into her palms. The pain was a sharp anchor, pulling her back into this terrible moment. From his booth, Lucas watched her go. His earlier irritation was gone, replaced by a cool, amused satisfaction. This was even better than he'd hoped. She wasn't running away. She was walking right into the trap. He leaned back, crossing his arms. He took a slow sip of his port, the sweet liquid tasting like victory. His friends were grinning, ready for the comedy. One of them pulled out his phone, not even trying to hide it now. He was going to record the train wreck. The restaurant manager, a man named David who prided himself on the Gilded Oak's dignified atmosphere, felt a cold sweat break out on his neck. This was a disaster. A scene. He should stop it. He should walk over, gently guide his waitress back to the kitchen, and apologize to Mr. Thorne for the disruption. But something in the way she walked, a grim determination in her steps, made him pause. And if he was honest, a small, secret part of him was tired of Lucas Thorne. Elena reached the piano. She stood beside it for a moment, looking down at the bench. It was just a bench, but to her, it looked like the edge of a cliff. Once she sat down, there was no going back. The quiet in the room was now a heavy, suffocating thing. You could hear the clink of a single ice cube in a glass from across the room. She pulled the bench out. The legs scraped softly on the floor. The sound made several people flinch. She sat. The leather of the bench was cool through her thin pants. She placed her hands in her lap, staring at the row of black and white keys. They looked unfamiliar and hostile. A vast, silent landscape she hadn't dared to enter in 8 long years. What was she doing? This was madness. She was going to fall apart in front of everyone. She would play some clumsy, childish tune, and the Millionaire's loud, barking laugh would be the first sound to break the silence, and it would echo in her ears for the rest of her life. She closed her eyes, breathed in. The air smelled of expensive wine, of garlic and seared steak, of floor polish. Underneath it all, if she focused, was a faint, familiar scent. Dust, old wood, the faint, metallic smell of piano wires. It was the smell of her childhood. It was the smell of peace. She didn't open her eyes. Her right hand lifted from her lap, as if pulled by a string. Her fingers, with their short, unpolished nails and the small callus from her pen, hovered over the keys. In the booth, Lucas nudged his friend. "Here we go," he whispered, his voice dripping with anticipation. "Bet you 500 she plays chopsticks." Elena's index finger touched a key. It was not a loud note. It was a single, deep, resonant note from the lower end of the piano. A C sharp. It hung in the air, pure and alone, vibrating through the silence. It was not the start of chopsticks. It was not the start of any popular song. It was something else. Something older, heavier. Her left hand joined, spreading across the lower keys, pressing down a slow, somber chord that seemed to make the air in the room grow thicker. The notes were low, like distant thunder, or a heartbeat heard from inside a tomb. A few people in the audience shifted in their seats. This wasn't what they were expecting. This wasn't funny. Lucas's smirk faltered, just for a second. What was this? Elena opened her eyes. She wasn't looking at the room, or at Lucas. She was looking at her hands on the keys, but she wasn't really seeing them either. She was somewhere else. She was in the small living room of her old home, with her mother on the sofa, a blanket over her legs, her eyes closed, a small smile on her face as she listened. She was playing this very piece, her mother's favorite. "It sounds like a storm," her mother had said once. "A beautiful, powerful storm. And then, in the middle, I can hear the sun trying to break through." Her fingers began to move dot. It started slowly. The famous haunting opening of Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor unfolded. It was not just the notes. Any trained robot could play the notes. This was the feeling. Each chord was a weight, a grief, a memory of long nights in a hospital room, of holding a thin hand, of watching the light slowly fade from the eyes she loved most. The music was dark, complex, and full of a profound sorrow that filled every corner of the quiet restaurant. The gasp from the audience was collective. It wasn't a loud gasp. It was the sound of dozens of people forgetting to breathe and then remembering all at once. Their jaws went slack. Eyes widened. The woman who had looked down in embarrassment earlier now stared, her hand over her mouth. Lucas Thorne sat up straight. His arm dropped from the back of the booth. The amused, superior glint in his eyes evaporated, replaced by pure, uncomprehending shock. The port glass in his hand felt suddenly stupid and childish. This was not a waitress fumbling through a nursery rhyme. This was a concert-level performance happening 6 feet in front of him. The power of the music was a physical force. It didn't ask for his attention. It commanded it. Elena was gone. The tired waitress was gone. In her place was someone else entirely. Her body swayed slightly with the rhythm of the music she had known by heart since she was 15. Her shoulders, usually hunched from carrying trays, were squared and strong. Her face, usually a mask of polite neutrality, was alive with emotion pain, longing, and a fierce, resilient strength the music built. The thunderous crashing chords rolled through the dining room, shaking the water in the glasses on the tables. It was angry. It was devastating. It was beautiful. You could hear 8 years of silence in it. 8 years of lost dreams, of quiet sacrifice, of love and loss. Every missed opportunity, every lonely night, every unpaid bill, it was all there, poured into the keys. David, the manager, felt a chill run down his spine. He knew a little of her story. He knew she'd had to leave school for family. He'd hired her out of pity, thinking she was just another down-on-her-luck kid. He never asked questions. He never imagined this. He looked from the transformed woman at the piano to the utterly shattered expression on Lucas Thorne's face, and a slow, hard smile touched his own lips. One of Lucas's friends lowered his phone. He wasn't recording anymore. He was just watching, his mouth agape. The piece moved into its quieter, more desperate middle section. The notes became faster, more intricate, a frantic, swirling dance of anxiety and hope. Elena's fingers flew across the keys with a precision and speed that seemed impossible for the same hands that had just cleared their steak plates. It was technically breathtaking. It was emotionally overwhelming. Lucas didn't move a muscle. The $1,000 dare was now the most shameful moment of his life. He had tried to buy a laugh at her expense, and instead, he had paid to have his entire worldview dismantled. He had judged her worth by her apron, by her job, by her silence. And she had answered him with a language he barely understood, but could feel in his bones. A language of depth, of history, of a soul-deep talent that no amount of his money could ever touch. He was a man who spent his life valuing things, companies, stocks, properties. He could look at a business and put a number on it. But what was the value of this? What was the price of 8 years of sacrifice? What was the cost of a dream put to sleep? He had no numbers for that. For the first time in a very long time, Lucas Thorne felt small and cheap and utterly, foolishly wrong. The music swelled again. returning to the powerful, tragic main theme with even greater force. A final, defiant cry against the darkness, before fading away into three final, solemn, heartbreaking notes. Asterisk bang. Bang, bang. Asterisk silence. A perfect, total, ringing silence. Elena's hands fell from the keys and lay still in her lap. Her head was bowed. She was back. The storm had passed, and she was just Elena again, sitting at a piano in a restaurant full of staring people, with her feet still hurting and her bills still waiting. She took a deep, shuddering breath. Then she stood up. She didn't look at Lucas. She didn't look at anyone. She just turned and walked, the same way she had come, across the shining floor, past the tables of stunned, silent people, and straight through the double doors into the kitchen. The moment she disappeared, the spell broke. The entire dining room erupted. It wasn't just applause. It was a roar. People jumped to their feet, clapping, cheering, some with tears in their eyes. It was loud, messy, and full of raw human emotion. At his booth, Lucas Thorne sat perfectly still in the middle of the roaring crowd, the sound of the applause washing over him, meaning nothing. All he could hear were those three final, quiet notes. Asterisk, bang, bang, asterisk, like a door closing forever. The roar from the dining room was a dull, muffled thunder through the kitchen doors. Elena pushed through them, and the world snapped back into a harsh, fluorescent focus. The heat hit her first, a wet blanket of steam and grease. The clatter of pans, the shouted call of order up. The hiss of the grill. It all rushed in to fill the silence the music had left in her head. She walked, eyes straight ahead, past the line cooks who were too busy to notice her. She passed the dishwasher, his face shiny with sweat, who gave her a quick, curious glance, but said nothing. She didn't stop until she reached the small, cramped staff room in the back. It was just a closet with a broken locker, a rickety table, and two chairs. The only light was a bare bulb swinging from a cord. She sat down heavily in one of the chairs. Her whole body was trembling. It wasn't from nerves anymore. It was a deep physical release, like a wire that had been pulled taut for years had finally snapped. She looked at her hands. They were still shaking. She turned them over, staring at the palms. They were red from where her nails had dug in earlier. They were the same hands, but they felt different. They felt alive in a way they hadn't in a very, very long time. They hummed with a memory. The door creaked open. David, the manager, slipped inside. He closed the door softly behind him, cutting off most of the kitchen noise. For a long moment, he just stood there, looking at her. His usual stern, businesslike expression was gone. He looked older and somehow softer. "Well," he said finally, his voice quiet. "That was something." Elena didn't look up. She just nodded, focusing on getting her breathing under control. I didn't know," David said. He leaned against the lockers, shoving his hands into his pockets. "I mean, I knew you'd studied music. Your application said that. But I didn't know it was that." Elena let out a short, breathy sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "Neither did I," she whispered. She hadn't known if she could still find it, that place in her mind where the music lived. She'd been afraid it had rusted shut. David was quiet again. He was a practical man. He worried about food costs and staff schedules and rude customers. This was far outside his territory. The whole dining room is buzzing. They're talking about nothing else. A few people asked for their checks and left, like they'd seen a ghost. Most of them are just sitting there, talking about it. He paused. He's still out there, Thorne, just sitting in his booth. Hasn't moved. His friends look like they've been hit by a truck. The mention of the millionaire's name brought Elena all the way back. The trembling began to subside, replaced by a cold, heavy feeling in her stomach. Shame. And then anger. Hot, sharp anger. He had made her do that. He had backed her into a corner and poked at a wound she kept carefully bandaged, just for his own amusement. The beauty of the music, the release she felt, it was all tangled up with the humiliation of why she'd had to play it in the first place. "I need to finish my side work," she said, her voice flat. She started to stand up. "No," David said, firm but not unkind. "Your shift is over. Consider it done. Go home. But the silverware, I'll have someone else do it. Just go." He looked at her, really looked at her. "You shouldn't have to go back out there. Not tonight." The kindness in his words, so unexpected, almost undid her. Her eyes stung. She nodded, swallowing hard. "Okay, use the back alley exit," he said, nodding toward the rear door. "Avoid the front." She gathered her things from her locker, a worn jacket, a small bag with her wallet and keys. Nothing else. David held the back door open for her. The cool night air hit her face, a relief after the kitchen's heat. It smelled of damp concrete and city smells. "Elena," David said as she stepped out. She turned. He looked awkward again. "For what it's worth." "Thank you." That was the most honest thing that's ever happened in that room. She gave him a small, tired smile that didn't reach her eyes. And then she walked away, her footsteps echoing in the empty alley. The sound of the city traffic was a welcome, normal noise. It drowned everything out. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Back in the dining room, the atmosphere was electric. The applause had died down, but a low, excited chatter had taken its place. People were leaning across tables, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. They were recounting what they'd just seen, trying to find the words. "Did you see her face? I've never heard anything like that live. Who is she?" At the booth in the corner, the chatter was a distant buzz. Lucas Thorne's friends were talking, their voices strained and too loud, trying to fill the terrible silence he was radiating. "Incredible, really?" one said, forcing a chuckle. "Totally unexpected. Yeah, she really showed you, huh, Lucas?" Another said, then immediately winced, realizing how it sounded. Lucas didn't hear them. He was staring at the empty piano bench. The pianist was gone, but the music wasn't. It was stuck in his head, on a loop. Those first deep, sorrowful chords. They played over and over. He had asked for a song. He had gotten a confession. A life story told in minor keys and crashing waves of sound. The waitress Elena. He'd heard the manager say her name was gone. But her absence was louder than her presence had been. He had reduced her to a punchline, and she had rewritten the entire joke. And he was the one left looking foolish. A different server. A young man looking very nervous approached the table with the bill folder. He placed it carefully in the center. "Gentlemen," he said softly, and then hurried away. One of Lucas's friends reached for it. "Let's just split this and get out of here, huh?" "No," Lucas said. The word came out rough. He reached out and took the leather folder. He opened it. The total was staggering. He didn't blink. He pulled a heavy money clip from his pocket, counted out more than enough cash to cover the bill and a standard tip. Then he paused. His fingers hovered over the hundreds. The $1,000 dare sat between them. A stupid, ugly ghost. He couldn't leave it. That would be worse. That would be pretending it never happened. He also couldn't leave it as a tip. That would be an insult. A transaction, turning her breathtaking pain into a paid performance. The money felt filthy in his hand. In the end, he added $1,000 to the pile. But it didn't feel generous. It felt like a fine. A penalty he was paying for being the kind of man who would make such a dare. He closed the folder, feeling sick. "Let's go," he said, his voice hollow. They left the booth. As they walked through the restaurant, Lucas could feel the eyes on him. Not admiring glances or looks of respect, but curious, judgmental stares. Whispers followed him. Asterisk, that's him. That's the guy who dared her. Asterisk, he was no longer the powerful millionaire in the corner booth. He was the villain in her story. A one-dimensional jerk in a tale that had suddenly become deep and complicated. The cool night air outside. The restaurant did nothing to clear his head. His friend's driver pulled the car up. As Lucas slid into the plush leather back seat, the silence among the men was thick and uncomfortable. "Drop me at the office," Lucas said abruptly. "Now?" "It's almost 11, a friend said. "The office," Lucas repeated, staring out the window at the blur of city lights. The car glided through the streets. Usually, Lucas looked at the city and saw opportunities. Buildings were valuations. Neighborhoods were markets. Tonight, he just saw windows. Lights on in apartments. People living lives he knew nothing about. People with hidden depths, with secret sorrows and talents buried under the daily grind. People he routinely overlooked. The car stopped at his sleek, modern office building. He got out without a word to his friends. He rode the silent elevator up to the top floor. His corner office was dark, illuminated only by the city skyline sprawling beyond the glass walls. He didn't turn on the lights. He walked to the window and stood there, looking out. He replayed the night, minute by minute. His smug comment about the wine. His sending back the steak. The moment he'd gotten the idea for the dare, the little thrill of power it gave him. The look on her face, not anger, but a kind of weary defeat before she'd said, "Keep your money." He had mistaken her quietness for emptiness. And then the walk to the piano. The silence. That first note. He had built his life and fortune on being right. On reading people, on assessing situations, on knowing more than the other guy. For the first time he could remember, he had been profoundly, publicly, and undeniably wrong. Not just about a fact, but about the very nature of a person. He had looked at a woman and seen a service worker, a nobody. He had missed the artist, the survivor, the powerhouse of emotion and discipline that was right in front of him. The music played again in his memory. It wasn't just sad. It was angry. It was a roar of frustration. He had been the target of that anger, even if she hadn't looked at him once. He had provoked a sleeping giant, and the echo of its wake-up call was shaking him to his core. He thought about the $1,000 he'd left. It was nothing to him. Less than nothing. It wouldn't fix what he'd done. It wouldn't give her back the years she'd lost. He, a man who solved every problem with money, suddenly found his only tool was useless. Lucas Thorne stayed at the window for a long time. The city slowly grew quieter. In the dark glass, he could see the faint reflection of his own face. He looked like himself, but he felt like a stranger. The next morning, Elena woke up with the same heavy feelings she carried every day. The sun was too bright through her thin curtains. The sounds of the city starting its day were the same. For a moment, lying there in her small bed, the previous night felt like a strange, vivid dream. The piano, the silence, the roar of the crowd, it was all so far removed from the quiet, worn-out reality of her apartment. Then she moved her fingers, and a dull ache, different from her usual fatigue, pulsed through them. A musician's ache. The memory rushed back, not as a triumph, but as a kind of embarrassing blur. She had lost control. She had shown a part of herself she'd sworn to keep locked away. And for what? To prove a point to a horrible man who had already forgotten her by now. The shame returned, hotter this time. She felt exposed. She got ready for her shift with robotic movements. Same clean black pants. Same white shirt. She didn't have another apron, so she brushed off the one from last night, the faint stain still there. It felt like a uniform from another life now. She avoided looking at the stack of bills on the table as she ate a piece of toast. When she pushed open the staff door of the Gilded Oak later that afternoon, the atmosphere was different. The kitchen staff didn't just nod. They stared. The head chef gave her a long look and then a single solemn nod of respect. The other waiters and waitresses were whispering, stopping when she got close. David called her into his small office before the dinner service. He looked tired. "Listen," he said, not meeting her eyes at first. "About last night. It's all anyone can talk about. We've had inquiries? Inquiries?" Elena's heart sank. Was she in trouble? Had she broken some rule? Phone calls. A few local bloggers. A guy from the culture section of the newspaper. David rubbed his forehead. They want to know about the mystery piano waitress. I didn't tell them anything. That's your business. But I want you to know, if anyone approaches you here, you send them straight to me. You don't have to talk to anyone. She nodded, relieved. Thank you. Also, he said, finally looking at her. His expression was complicated. He came back, Thorne, about an hour ago. A cold dread washed over Elena. What? Why? He asked for you. I told him you weren't in. He asked when your shift started. I told him that was staff information. He just stood there for a minute. Then he left. David shook his head. He looked different. Not so. Puffed up. The idea of facing that man again made Elena feel sick. She didn't want his apology. She didn't want to see the look in his eyes, whatever it might be now, pity, curiosity, guilt. She just wanted to forget it. If he comes back, David said, his voice firm. You point at me. I'll handle it. The dinner shift was the strangest she'd ever worked. Customers in her section kept looking at her, really looking at her, not through her. A few asked, tentatively, if she was the one who played last night. She would give a tight smile and a nod and ask if they were ready to order. One older couple, after finishing their meal, left a tip that was far too large and a note that said, "Thank you for the gift." It felt awful. She didn't want to be a spectacle. She just wanted to be invisible again, to do her job and go home. The piano in the center of the room sat like a sleeping beast, and everyone kept glancing at it, then at her. He walked in just after 8 o'clock. Elena saw him the moment he entered. Lucas Thorne. He was alone. He wasn't wearing a sleek suit today, just dark trousers and a simple jacket. He looked smaller somehow, less sure of himself. He spoke to the host, who glanced nervously towards the kitchen. David, who had been watching, immediately walked out front. Elena ducked into the staff hallway, her heart hammering. She heard the low murmur of voices from the dining room. A minute later, David found her. He wants to talk to you. Just for a minute. He says he'll leave right after, and he won't come back. David sighed. I can tell him to get lost. It's your call. But he's not making a scene. He seems serious. Elena thought about hiding in the walk-in cooler until he left. But a stubborn part of her, the same part that had walked to the piano, reared up. She was tired of being scared. Tired of running. She had faced him down with Rachmaninoff. She could face him with words. Okay, she said, her voice barely a whisper. But out here, in the alley, not inside. David looked surprised, but agreed. He went to tell him. A few minutes later, Elena pushed open the heavy back door into the cool, dimly lit alley. The dumpsters smelled of rotten food and garbage. It was a far cry from the elegant dining room. It felt honest. Lucas Thorne was standing there, looking out of place against the grimy brick wall. He turned when he heard the door. Seeing him here, in her world, was surreal. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. The arrogant, sneering man from the booth was gone. In his place was someone who looked tired and uncomfortable and older. He spoke first. "You probably don't want to see me," he said. His voice was quiet. No more booming confidence. "No," Elena said simply. "I don't." He nodded, accepting it. "I don't blame you." He shifted his weight, looking down at the cracked asphalt. "I came here last night to—" "I don't know." "Leave a note?" It felt stupid. "I came today because I couldn't not come." He finally looked up at her. "What I did last night, it was cruel. And small. I am. Deeply ashamed." Elena crossed her arms, not saying anything. An apology from a man like him was just more words. They didn't pay the bills. They didn't give her back her time. "I left the money," he continued, clearly struggling. "The 1,000. It felt worse than leaving nothing. It felt like I was trying to pay for it. And I can't." He took a breath. "I asked David, the manager, about you. Not to pry. I just needed to understand. He told me a little. About your mother. About you leaving school." A flash of white-hot anger shot through Elena. That wasn't his story to tell. "I know," Lucas said quickly, holding up a hand. "I pushed. It was wrong. Again. I heard that music, and I realized I knew nothing. Nothing about real struggle. About giving something up like that." He looked truly pained. "I spend my life putting a price on things. On companies, on ideas, on people's time. I thought I could put a price on a song. On your dignity. I was an idiot." The raw honesty in his words was disarming. It wasn't a polished, public apology. It was messy and awkward. It sounded real. "Why are you telling me this?" Elena asked, her voice still cold. "You said your piece. You can go. Because an apology is worthless if it doesn't come with an attempt to make things right," he said, the words rushing out now. "And I can't make last night right. I can't give you back those years. But I might be able to help with. Now." Elena's guard went up even higher. "I don't want your help. I'm not offering you a handout," he said, his voice firmer. "I'm offering a business proposal." From one professional to another. That made her pause. She raised an eyebrow. "David mentioned your mother's house. That it's been for sale. That it's a wait." Lucas's business instincts were creeping back into his tone, but it was different now. Softer. "I have a colleague. Her family is in real estate. Good people. They're not sharks. If you're willing, I can have her look at it. Not to buy it from you cheap. To sell it for you properly at a fair market price. They're good at moving properties that have been stuck. They do it as a favor to me. No commission for them." Elena stared at him. Selling the house was her biggest, most hopeless problem. It was a constant, silent scream in the back of her mind. The realtor's fees, the slow market in that neighborhood, the repairs she couldn't afford. It was a trap. The idea of it being gone, of that knot being untied. "What's the catch?" she asked, her voice flat. "No catch," he said. "You say yes. I make an introduction. You talk to her. If you don't like her, you walk away. That's it." He paused. "There's one other thing. Another introduction. If you want it." Elena waited, silent. "A friend of mine," Lucas said, choosing his words carefully. "He's a music professor at the university. He's a good man." He heard about what happened last night. It's a small city. He asked me about it. This part seemed even harder for him to say. He said if you were willing, he would like to hear you play. just to listen, not to judge. He said a talent like that, it shouldn't be locked in a restaurant. The word talent in his mouth sounded strange. Sacred almost. Elena felt the world tilt. This was all too much. The house. The professor. It felt like a trap dressed up as kindness. A way for him to feel better about himself. To balance his books. But the thought of playing for someone who understood. Not for a dare, not for a room of strangers, but for someone who spoke the language. It was a tiny, dangerous flicker of hope in a long, dark room. She looked at him, really looked at him, there in the dirty alley. He wasn't smirking. He was just waiting, looking more vulnerable than she ever thought a man like him could look. "I'll think about the house thing," she said finally, her voice hoarse. "I need to think. The other thing, I don't know." He nodded, a look of profound relief washing over his face. She hadn't said yes, but she hadn't thrown his offer back in his face. It was more than he deserved. "Okay," he said. He reached into his jacket pocket, not for a wallet, but for a simple, plain business card. He wrote a number on the back. "That's my direct line. Not my office. Just, if you decide. Either way." He held it out. After a long hesitation, Elena took it. The card was thick, expensive paper. It felt foreign in her hand. "I'll go now," he said. He turned to leave, then stopped. He didn't look back, just spoke to the alley wall. "What you played. It was the most real thing I've ever heard. Thank you for that. And I'm sorry I made you have to prove it." And then he was gone, walking down the alley and turning the corner, leaving her alone with the hum of the kitchen vent and a small, heavy card in her hand. She stood there for a long time, staring at the spot where he'd been. The anger was still there, a solid rock in her gut. But around it, something else was stirring. Not forgiveness. Not yet, but confusion. And a terrifying, fragile sliver of possibility. 3 weeks passed. The strange energy at the Gilded Oak slowly faded. The other waitstaff stopped staring. The customers stopped asking. The piano was just furniture again. Life returned to its normal, difficult rhythm. But for Elena, nothing was the same. The business card sat on her kitchen table, a small, heavy rectangle of possibility. She moved it from one spot to another, sometimes hiding it under a bill, sometimes leaving it out in the open as a test. She thought about throwing it away a dozen times. Trusting that man felt like the stupidest thing she could do. But the problem of the house wouldn't go away. The realtor's calls had become a weekly ritual of disappointment. "Price reduction," he'd say, his voice full of fake cheer. "Just needs more exposure." It was a polite way of saying it was a lost cause. Finally, one rainy Tuesday morning, she picked up the card. She dialed the number written on the back, her finger trembling. It rang twice. "Yes?" His voice was brisk, but not unkind. "It's Elena," she said, the words sticking in her throat. A pause. "Okay." His tone shifted, became careful. "Thank you for calling. I want to talk to the real estate person," she said, all in a rush. "About the house. Just to talk." "Of course," he said. "I'll set it up. She'll call you this afternoon. Her name is Claire. You tell her what you need. Nothing happens unless you say so." True to his word, a woman named Claire called 2 hours later. Her voice was warm and calm, with no pressure. She asked questions about the house, the neighborhood, the reasons it hadn't sold. She listened. Really listened. She didn't make promises, but she said she saw a clear path forward. She explained how her firm could market it differently, to a different kind of buyer. "It's not a bad house," Claire said gently. "It's just been telling the wrong story." Elena agreed to let her try. There were no contracts yet, just an understanding. A week later, Claire called back. She had an offer. Not a lowball, desperate offer. A fair, solid, market-price offer from a young family who loved the garden Elena's mother had tended. The closing would be fast. The weight that had been crushing Elena's chest for 2 years began. Minutely, to lift Dot, she called the number on the card again. "He did it," she said when he answered. "Claire, the offer." "It's good." "I'm glad," he said, and he sounded like he meant it. There was a long silence. "And the other thing? The professor?" "I'm not ready," Elena said quickly. "That's fine," he replied, no push in his voice. "The offer doesn't expire. The sale of the house went through." The mountain of medical debt shrank to a manageable hill. For the first time in her adult life, Elena had a small financial cushion. The constant, grinding fear of the next bill quieted to a whisper. The space that fear left behind was both a relief and terrifying. It was filled with a question. Asterisk, what now? Asterisk, she found herself looking at her hands differently. She would catch herself tapping a rhythm on her thigh, her fingers moving through silent scales on the edge of her waitressing tray. The music, now that it had been let out of its cage, wouldn't go back in. It paced inside her, restless. One afternoon, after her shift, instead of going straight home, she walked. She walked past the bus stops and busy streets until she found herself in a quieter part of the city, near the university. She stood outside the School of Music, a grand old stone building. Students with instrument cases hurried in and out, talking and laughing. They looked so young, so sure. She took out the business card. She dialed. "I think I'm ready," she said, her voice barely more than a breath. "To meet the professor." The meeting was set for the following Thursday afternoon, in a small rehearsal room. Elena wore her one nice dress, a simple navy blue thing she saved for funerals. She felt like an imposter. The professor was an older man with kind eyes and gentle hands. His name was Robert. His office was cluttered with sheet music and photos of former students. He didn't ask about the restaurant. He didn't mention the Millionaire. He just smiled and said, "I'm told you have something to share. Whenever you're ready." The piano in the room was old, the keys slightly yellowed. It felt real, not like a prop. Elena sat. The familiar panic started to rise. This was worse than the restaurant. This was a professional. He would hear every mistake, every bit of rust. She played the same piece. Rachmaninoff's Prelude. But it was different this time. The anger was gone. The defiance was gone. What was left was the pure, raw sorrow of it, and a new tentative thread of something else. Hope, maybe. Or memory without so much pain. When she finished, her hands in her lap, the room was quiet. Professor Robert was silent for a long time, looking out the window. "That," he said finally, "is not a forgotten talent. That is a dormant one. There is a big difference." He turned to her. "The technique is rusty, yes. The stamina is not what it was. But the soul of the music, that is intact. That is rare." He offered her something then, not a scholarship or a promise of fame. He offered her a key, literally. "Practice room 4B, he said. "It's free on Monday and Wednesday mornings. No one uses it. The key is yours. Come and play. For yourself. See what happens." Elena took the key. It felt heavier than the one to her apartment. She started going. At first, just an hour a week. Then 2. The simple act of playing, without an audience, without a dare, was like medicine. The stiffness in her fingers began to soften. She didn't just play the old stormy pieces. She tried new things. Sometimes she just played chords, letting them ring in the empty room. Months drifted by. Lucas Thorne kept his distance. He called once, after the house sale finalized, just to make sure Claire had treated her fairly. He never mentioned the piano. She heard from Claire that he had become a quieter presence in his business dealings, less prone to flashy shows of power. The story of the waitress and the piano had become a quiet legend in certain circles, a parable about humility. He never tried to take credit for any part of her next steps. One cool spring evening, Professor Robert asked her to stay after her practice. "There's a small recital next month," he said casually. "My intermediate students. It's informal. In the small hall. I have a slot open. 7 minutes." Elena's stomach dropped. "A recital? I'm not a student." "You have something to say," he said, echoing his first words to her. "An audience, even a small one, is part of the conversation. Think about it." She thought about it for a week. The fear was immense. But it was a different fear now. Not the fear of a cruel man's laugh, but the fear of being seen for who she was trying to become. She said yes. The night of the recital, she arrived early. The hall was indeed small, with maybe 50 chairs set up. It was filled with parents, friends, a few other professors. And in the very back row, sitting alone, was Lucas Thorne. He wore a simple sweater. He didn't wave or smile. He just gave a single slow nod when she saw him. He had heard about it from Professor Robert, who had asked his permission to invite him. Elena had said it was fine. She wasn't playing Rachmaninoff this time. She had chosen something different. A piece by Chopin. It was melancholy, but not devastating. It was about memory, but also